Today, finding your prospects' emails has become so easy that it's almost scary. In 5 minutes, you can collect thousands of qualified emails legally and start your outreach immediately. I'll show you exactly how to do it with the best tools on the market in this video. I'm Antoine Thoreau, co-founder of the Sendo agency and the B2B Ninja training programs. Basically, we help B2B companies sign more clients through cold outreach, AI, and go-to-market engineering. All right, let's get started. I'm going to show you 3 different approaches and demonstrate how, just like I did in this example, you can start with a file of 200 profiles and get 191 verified professional emails. That's an enrichment rate of 94%. We'll use this example I recently did for a client where we're targeting e-commerce managers on a very international basis. There are profiles from all over the world, and this will allow us to test different tools that help find emails without necessarily focusing only on France. You see, I have this file that hasn't been enriched with emails yet, but it contains all the useful information. The first thing to know is that to find emails, what you need as input is necessarily the first name, last name, and the company name. With these 3 pieces of information, you'll be able to use software that, so to speak, guesses or finds professional emails. So those were the columns in green. There are 2 pieces of information that can be extremely useful to you and can improve your discoverability rate with this type of tool. Because quite simply, these are pieces of information that allow you to target the company even more precisely. These pieces of information are the company's domain, as you can see here, and or the URL of the LinkedIn page of the person's profile in question. Although we don't see it here, in some cases, the URL of the company page can also serve as the domain, and this allows for uniquely and reliably identifying the company. In some rather exceptional cases, on certain enrichment tools, the address will also be useful because basically it allows the tool to better specify the search area it needs to target. So don't forget that you'll always need these inputs. Now we're going to look at several tools that allow us to find the emails of all these people from this file. The first approach I suggest is to check them manually one by one, taking the first person on the list, for example, this person who works for BASF. If I want to find them uniquely, what I recommend is to go to Hunter. Why? Because on Hunter, it's a very comprehensive tool like many others, except they have a free version that still gives you 50 credits per month. So if your needs are limited to that and are rather occasional, you'll be able to find everything for free. In the tool, you can use the tab called Finder, and there you have 2 options. Either you search by company. For example, if I'm looking for my famous contact, they're at BASF. You can see that, in fact, the tool already knows almost every company in the world, and it identifies the domain name. And you can see that there's a BASF.com with 9,000 results, so you can guess that's where we're going to look for this person's email. There are others with no results, and one in S where there is a result, so it's probably a generic email, and we can clearly see that we're not interested in that, and that the employees' addresses are indeed on the BASF.com domain. When you confirm this, it will show you, hidden, a bunch of addresses it knows, and above all, if you use your credits to reveal them, it allows you to see the syntax or the pattern, as they call it here. That is, what is the email pattern? You can see here is firstname.lastname@basf.com, like the majority of professional emails, but it's not always exactly this syntax. From this syntax and from the person's first and last name, you can easily guess it. You see, I've saved them to my clipboard. So actually, if I try to guess, that's how you can reconstruct the specific person's email address. Next, you can go to the Verify tab and enter it here, and you also use a credit to verify it, well, half a credit. And then you'll get a response from the tool telling you whether the email, according to it, is valid or not, with different possible statuses. It even gives you a probability score that the email is correct. And here, with a score of 200%, obviously we know it's a good address. Now, if you want to enrich a database all at once with 100, 1,000, or 10,000 rows, you can use the paid versions of these tools, like Drop Contact, for example. Why am I talking to you about Drop Contact in particular? Because it's true that it's one of, if not the best provider of verified professional emails on the French market. What you also need to keep in mind is that all these tools, and there are a lot of competitors, are more or less relevant depending on the geographic area you're working in. And if you're targeting the North American market in general, you'll need to use different tools than you would for the European market, especially the French market. So once again, for the French market, Drop Contact is really good. The interface is extremely simple. You can see here we just need to upload our file. So how does it actually work with information like this? If you don't know how to put this together, how to scrape this kind of data, for example, from LinkedIn or in Clays, I refer you to other videos where I explain it, but let's assume we're starting from here. Basically, you just need to download everything in CSV format and then drag and drop it into Drop Contact. It's extremely simple. Then it will process the file and automatically detect the column headers and what each piece of information corresponds to. I don't even need to map anything for it, like telling it, this is the first name, this is the last name, this is the company name. In quotes, it's smart and understands on its own. It tells me that it has identified 191 rows to process, to go through. And all I have to do is click OK to start the enrichment. It gives me an estimated date for when the enriched file will be ready. That's in 10 minutes, and we'll check it out once it's done processing. Actually, it only took about 2 minutes. We have the result file. I can simply click here to download it, and it gives it to me as an Excel file, which I'll open right away to show you what it looks like. So here it is. It adds columns with different colors, but most importantly, what interests us is that it has filled in a number of emails and assigned them a qualification. And so it tells you whether it's a valid email or a catch-all with the uncertainty that comes with that type, etc. If we look at what Drop Contact found for us on a target, again, a French one, which isn't exactly its strong suit, it found us 50 professional emails. And so, as you can see, we're at about 25% enrichment, which is far from the 94% I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And we'll see together how we can improve this enrichment rate. Here, you can easily see the limitation of relying on just one enrichment tool. For your information, Drop Contact will also clean up a certain amount of information for you, depending on the options you've selected. It will check the accuracy of the first and last names and verify that they haven't been swapped. For most contacts, it will also add the appropriate title, such as Mr. or Mrs., and it will also add information related to the company, including phone lines that are landlines, not mobile numbers, but which can still have some value. So as we see here, we'll probably say, okay, 25% of enriched emails isn't enough. Even if we reach 50%, which is entirely achievable with Drop Contact, we'd still say, well, that's not enough. What do we do with all the profiles for which we can't find an email address? The solution that has now become obvious and standard in the market is to use a cascade of enrichment tools. One of the first solutions to offer this as such is a tool called Better Contact. Better Contact, in fact, lines up, as you can see in their little animation, different providers of professional contact information, whether it's email or phone number. The process is very simple, and you'll understand it very quickly. It queries the first provider in the cascade. If this first provider returns an email that is verified and valid, we stop there and record it in the final file. If they don't have the information, we move on to the next provider, and so on. This obviously allows you to maximize the discoverability rate. There are many tools today that use cascading, and it's now even integrated into solutions that allow you to manage outreach campaigns like Lemlist instantly, and so on. I'm in contact with the founder, Frederick of Better Contact, and I asked him, quite frankly, what is really the advantage of using your solution compared to, for example, enrichment tools that themselves use cascading on the list. His answer can be broken down into several points. The first thing is the number of providers. They promise us between 16 and 20 data providers, whereas on Lemlist, for example, it's 8, and it's true that this will ultimately allow for a higher enrichment rate. The second thing is that they have a verification process that's really rock solid. That is to say, they make it a point to ensure that everything coming out of Better Contact is thoroughly verified, so there are no unpleasant surprises, and this absolutely minimizes your bounce rate due to invalid emails. The other notable feature, which is actually quite interesting, is that they have developed their own AI that allows, as you can see here in their illustration with the little animations, to change the order of the cascading process depending on the geographic area where you are searching for prospects. And this once again allows you to optimize the results in the end. For your information, they are also connected with campaign sequencing tools, and they can push this data natively with synchronizations that are available within the tool. So this can be quite convenient. Inside the tool, this is how it works. You can either launch a manual enrichment by uploading your CSV file or use the API to automate the whole process. We're going to have some fun launching the enrichment on the same CSV file to see the differences. I submit my file. Here, unlike with Drop Contact, it will ask me to do the mapping, so to speak, just to be sure, even though it will have already pre-filled most things. So it has understood where the first names are and where the last names are. Surprisingly, it didn't find the LinkedIn profile URL. So here, unlike Drop Contact, it asked me to do the mapping, or at least to validate what it has understood on its own. It correctly identified the first name, last name, LinkedIn profile URL, company name, and domain name. We don't have the LinkedIn page URL, but as I was saying, these fields are interchangeable. So the more information you have, the more reliable your enrichment will be, but you're not required to have the domain, the LinkedIn page URL, or even the person's LinkedIn profile. The only mandatory fields will always be first name, last name, and company name. Here, we're only going to enrich with emails and not with phone numbers, which are more expensive. Now we'll let it work. We can see that it has already found some, but as you can imagine, since it's a cascading system, it needs to take its time to query all possible data sources. Right now, it's processing. Now I'm going to show you the ultimate solution to create your own enrichment cascade and achieve the highest possible rate with rates, as we've seen, that can reach 94%, like in this example, and in some cases can come close to 100%. So we're switching back to Clay, where I have my database with the 203 profiles and the enrichment I've already performed. You can clearly see here how the cascade works. That is, I have a first provider, which is Lead Magic, that has been queried. Each time, however, when it returns information about an email, we verify it with zero bounce in this case. Then, for those that weren't found, we query the second provider, in this case Drop Contact. When it finds something, we again ask for it to be verified with zero bounce. When it's not found, we move on to provider number 3, and so on. To do this on any table with contacts in Clay, it's very simple. You come here, click on Enrichment, and either search in the search bar or find Work Email directly here. This is the feature natively offered by Clay, which directly provides you with a cascade using a number of providers. I don't know how they chose them. I don't know if it's arbitrary or if they have special connections, but there are about 10 of them. You have 2 tabs for the setup, Quick Setup and Full Configuration. With the Quick Setup, you can already specify which column contains the person's full name and where you have the company's domain. But again, this is optional. You don't have to provide it, but some providers won't work without it. The company name. By hovering your mouse over each one, you can check that it gives you a preview of the information to make sure it's the right column. The LinkedIn profile URL and the company page URL. As for the personal email, honestly, I don't use it. This will allow you to distribute this information in the configuration of the 10 providers you see here. But if you need to, you can go into the full configuration and check the required inputs inside again. What's also interesting to note is that at this stage, you'll be able to select the validation provider this time, not the enrichment provider, the one that actually checks the validity of the emails. Here by default, it's find email, but you can choose whichever one you want. Obviously, if you run it as is, you can see the number of credits Clay will use. It gives you an estimate at the bottom, about 3 credits per row, because in some cases, it might use more credits. For example, if it hasn't found anything with any of the first 9 providers, it will use the 10th one, which costs 6 credits, so it's really expensive. And even if you let it use the initial ones that cost 2 Clay credits, it's still very expensive. What you can do instead, and that's what I did in my template at Sendo, which is set up, is use your own API keys. You can see that in my complete setup, the first 3 are in blue, which indicates that we're using our own API key. That's also the case for email verification. We use zero bounce and we have our own API key. To do this, if you haven't set it up yet, you just need to click inside. And at this point, instead of you'll start from this setting here, an account managed by Clay, and you'll select something else. If you haven't set anything up yet, you'll need to click on Add Account, and there you'll be able to enter the API key from your enrichment account, which you can easily find in the settings. With this system, you have virtually no limitations. Here we have, in our case, maybe a dozen or 15, which is already a lot. But in fact, you can then set up your own cascade. You can add new enrichment services. For example, here, I could add Apollo. I'm not going to set it up. If I do, it will run as well. And depending on the cost, whether it's cost through Clay credits or through my API keys, you can change the order. That's why, obviously, the first 3, which use our own credits, so with controlled costs and economies of scale, are the ones placed first. But if I had other tools, I could absolutely switch up the order. Here, it's really 100% customizable, and it even allows you to run tests if you want. And as I was saying, in markets that aren't necessarily French, or in international markets, or in markets you haven't worked in before, testing different tools or changing the order will also help you optimize your enrichment and the cost of that enrichment. Let me go back for a few minutes to my Better Contact dashboard. It hasn't even finished yet. In fact, for some of them, it's still querying the tools at the end of the chain. But as you can see, it has already found 89% of emails from the list I gave it. We're working with a rather international database. Obviously, you can see that this is much higher than the roughly 25% we got on exactly the same database with Drop Contact, which makes sense since it uses about 15 tools in succession. Let's recap. For one-by-one searches, you can use Hunter, for example. For batch processing, I recommend using a dedicated tool like Drop Contact, especially for France. To further improve your enrichment rate, you need to use cascading. You step up your game with a tool like Better Contact, and at the expert level, you set all this up in Clay to find those last hidden emails and surpass the 90% enrichment mark. If you want to master the entire acquisition process, email, phone, LinkedIn, scraping, I think you're on the right channel. So don't forget to subscribe to catch new videos. You can keep learning by watching other tutorials, for example, the equivalent of this video but for phone numbers, to find phone numbers and direct lines so you can supply your salespeople and they can make calls. I've put links in the video description to all the tools we've covered in this video so you can go try them out right away. See you very soon.